Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we are finally reviewing Zack Snyder's Justice League. Yes, we've made it to the promised land. 135 episodes of Off Script since we first reviewed Justice League episode 1, our very first episode. Now we've come full circle. We're here. It's out. 4 hours. We both watched it. Oh my God, I'm excited to talk about it.
I can't believe it. That was our first episode, and now we're coming back to it. We've come full circle.
Yeah, I didn't know it was our first. It wasn't until you pointed it out, either just after the last week's recording or sometime this week. You're like, "Hey, man, our first episode was Justice League." Oh God, it is. You're right. So here we are, all this time later. It's like we're coming home, really. And we're not any better at podcasting than we were then. So thanks for listening, I guess. Before we get to that, we need to talk about the news. We're also going to take a look at a couple trailers. Typically, when we do our shows, we do 2 films and we do some kind of middle segment in the middle where we put trailers in between our reviews. This is just one because Justice League is too big to be paired with any other film. So we're going to do our news. We're going to do our trailers. Then we will get into the review. We'll talk about a little correspondence at the end of the episode. And that's our show. So let's jump right into it. First things first, we have some numbers on the U.S. box office because in 2020, things were not going so hot. A lot of people were streaming. Not a lot of people were going to movie theaters. And now we finally have an idea of how the movie theaters held up. We are seeing that U.S. box office numbers have fallen, wait for it, 80% in 2020. As streaming has boomed. That is not nothing. Andy, what do you know about this story?
Well, I forgot to review this again before.
I did too, so that's fine.
Well, I mean, to the surprise of no one, the theatrical market was really hurt by the pandemic, and streaming boomed because everyone had to stay home. So that's not surprising at all that the box office is down 80% after having, a record year in 2019. So it's not really surprising, but it's interesting to have solid numbers.
Yeah, it's equally not particularly surprising, but interesting to see. We finally have an idea of broad streaming service success. We officially saw over 1 billion subscribers to entertainment streaming services in 2020. Specifically, we hit about 1.1 billion globally. That's what, an eighth of the world is watching streaming services and paying for it. That is bananas. And again, no surprise. I don't think anybody listening to this show is going to be like astounded by that data, but even still, it is huge. Not as huge as the tremendous dip in theater attendance. However, I know obviously coronavirus has upset things a little bit, but we're looking at 80% decline, which is, I mean, dude, you pair that industry taking an 80% nosedive right next to streaming services rocketing up, and you can see this like real leap in entertainment consumption, right? And how we consume entertainment, especially in our own country. Like everybody jumped. Something that should have taken 5 or 10 years all happened in the span of a year because suddenly nobody could go to theaters, but everybody had to watch stuff at home. It was not, the coronavirus has not been kind to the movie theater industry, I guess.
No, it's been real rough. Another interesting thing about this story is that for the first time, China has actually been the world leader for the box office at about $3 billion. Usually it's second or third, but they opened up much sooner than we did here in the States.
Yeah. Next up after that is America. And then third is Japan, in case you're curious what the biggest box office countries are. Again, not really a surprise, but just a staggering number. I don't know what I expected, I guess. I think, especially in America, it's easy to kind of get horse blinders on for where you're at locally. You know, we are in Dallas, so we look at Dallas, we look at Texas, we know things are tough. We look at LA, we look at New York. Wow, yeah, nobody's going to theaters out there. But to see 4 out of 5 tickets weren't sold this year and compared to 2019. That's a lot of movies, man. But I'm glad the industry's bouncing back. You know, streaming services have kind of paved the way for movies that aren't necessarily giant blockbusters being successful. We have a lot of like mid-budget Hollywood features now that we can watch, and we can see things like Justice League from the comfort of our own homes. Not such a bad setup, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's brought about a lot of change. Some of it's going to be permanent, some of it's kind of not, which we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Yeah. And, it's really opened the door for a lot of like reboots and sequels, which Ties in perfectly to our next story. Ace Ventura 3 is in the works at Amazon with the Sonic the Hedgehog writing team attached. My God, this is an odd headline to read. What do you know about this, Andy?
Talk about a blast from the past here. So Ace Ventura, for those who don't know, was two films that Jim Carrey made in the early 90s. Very kind of absurdist comedy. Very funny, both very successful. And, 25, nearly 30 years later, we're going to be getting a third installment.
Yeah, they they tried to kind of run with Ace Ventura for a minute. There was some kind of animated show back in the 90s. There was like Son of the Mask. There was like a Ace Ventura kid detective kind of thing with like his son at one point. Really, like they've tried to run with the property, but without Jim Carrey, it just doesn't work. And like the first two films had it. That was it. And even the second one was not as outstanding as the first. There's some good bits, but otherwise, this is a big deal to say that, okay, we are officially moving here. I think it helps that they've got the Sonic the Hedgehog team on it, because obviously Carrey had some success over there playing Dr. Robotnik in that film. Do we know if he's actually in for a third movie? Because I think that will be what matters.
Oh, of course. Like if he's not in it, it's not going to matter. You can't replicate that, not unless you had like a Robin Williams person or character like that. So we don't know. He's not attached just yet, but hopefully he will be.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I'm skeptical for sure. I mean, even if he is in it, I'm skeptical because like the whole reason Ace Ventura worked and like really launched Carrey's career is because he went like just 110% on the energy, right? Just so manic and all over the place. And that was 27 years ago. Like he's older now for sure. And like Dr. Robotnik was a pretty goofy character, but like it's nothing like Ace Ventura. I mean, so I don't know. If he gets into it, maybe it'll be awesome.
Yeah, he's gonna have to bring in. It's got to be absurd. It's got to be so over the top. He hasn't done a character like that in quite some time.
No. So if he does go for it, I'll be looking forward to seeing it. At the same time, if he passes on the character, like I totally get it. It was like 30 years ago. Like what do you expect? Well, in some brighter news, Regal Cinemas is going to be reopening. Finally, the third biggest theater chain in the world is whipping open after they reached a deal with Warner Brothers for some theatrical releases alongside streaming services, similar to the way AMC and Cinemark has. Andy, I'm going to be honest, I didn't read this story before the show. What do you know about this?
So like we said, with it, Regal's going to be slowly opening their theaters starting next month. And they've developed some sort of 45-day exclusive theatrical window with Warner Brothers. Now, I don't know if exclusive means that they're the only theaters getting them. I can't imagine that's it. But this upsets the deal that they were going to do, which was do day and date releases on HBO Max.
Yeah.
That was originally what they had announced in December because we didn't really know what was going to happen this year with coronavirus. So that looks like that's probably going to be out the window or at some point discontinued, maybe or in the next couple of months, and we're going to be back to theatrical exclusive releases. But the big news here is that it's the theatrical window, which was 90 days, is now only going to be 45, and in some circumstances only 31 days before going to rental VOD. And this is what we've always wanted. We wanted these things to be available much, much sooner than they were.
Yeah. This is an interesting deal because, it's saying here that they're going to have 45-day exclusivity with Warner Brothers theatrical releases. I'm assuming that means that Warner Brothers theatrical releases will be in theaters exclusively, not just available at Regal.
Right. That's what it means. That's what needs the clarification there.
Yes. And that's for 45 days, which is a big deal, especially considering their strategy right now in 2021, which is to dump all of their stuff the day it comes out on HBO as well as in theaters. This is for 2022. It's important to clarify that this does not apply to any films in 2021. This is strictly starting next year, but it looks like, if I didn't know any better, Warner Brothers is going to be releasing stuff exclusively in theaters again. Not for 90 days though, which is good. Just for 45. I think it's a reasonable way to go.
Well, they really need flexibility because, some films do better than others. So if something's doing poorly, you want to get it out to rental PVOD kind of as soon as possible. If it's got a lot of staying power, then yeah, you want to flex those 45 days as much as you can.
Yeah. And honestly, while I really enjoy being able to watch like this content at home right when it comes out, especially in the case of something like what we're talking about today, Zack Snyder's Justice League, I don't see a problem with having to wait a month and a half to watch it as well. Because that might be the way this goes. Maybe they say, okay, for 45 days it's in theaters, and then immediately on the 46th day it's on HBO. That would be great. I would not be sour about that at all. We'd still go watch stuff for the show. People could watch it after. Like, that's not a bad deal, but we don't know. We'll just have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure I don't think it would go directly to HBO Max. I think it would probably go to a rental service first, and then another month and a half, then it'll be on a streaming service.
Yeah. The most interesting thing for me is how Warner is pivoting, like looking into the future. Because I was really hoping, as a consumer at least, who enjoys watching stuff at home, that they would just run with the stuff premieres at the same day on HBO. Like I've really enjoyed that. And the value like from HBO is unmatched compared to other streaming services, in my film loving opinion. But obviously they're looking forward. They realize that it's not a sustainable strategy. Once the world opens back up, once we're not doing this face mask thing anymore, it sounds like we're going to be back in theaters for better or worse.
Right. And what's interesting, Disney, in contrast, is still going to do day and date releases. We didn't talk about this in news, but Black Widow got pushed to July 6th, and that's going to be on both Disney Plus for $30, or you can see it in theater. So they're going to stick with the day and date release with the premium cost if you want to see it today. I think that might be the way to really go in the future. Is you want to see it at home day one, it's going to cost you.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I didn't catch that news before the theater.
That's hot news.
Ooh,
Black Widow. Yeah, Black Widow pushed to July, but still opening
and coming out at home, so I could pay $30 and watch it here.
Yep.
All right. Well, not such a bad deal then. Well, keep it here on Off Script for more movie news. It's about all we got this week, but we do need to talk about some trailers, because we can talk about Justice League. But like I said at the top, typically we split this stuff into two parts. But nobody split Justice League for us, so by God, we're going to talk about it all at once. That's the plan. Let's talk about what we've got coming up. First things first, we have a trailer for a movie called Concrete Cowboy. Concrete Cowboy is the story of 15-year-old Cole, who discovers the world of urban horseback riding when his mom sends him to live with his estranged father, played by Idris Elba, in northern Philadelphia. The father is a modern cowboy, lives in some kind of apartment or townhouse in North Philly, and has a horse. And his neighbors have horses, and they like ride around, and they live like cowboys do. And this is set, as far as I know, in present time, very close to it. It's based on a book called Ghetto Cowboy from an author named Gene Ree. It's going to be a project on Netflix. Andy, hot takes on the trailer.
It looks good. It's an interesting, premise. Father-son drama, coming of age thing with these literal urban cowboys. It looks good. Looks interesting. Don't really get a lot of feel for the movie, but it's the Idris Elba plays the father, and he's he, like, his son comes home and he's like, okay, here's your bed, and it's like the couch, so there's going to be a lot of stress and strain there, and then things are going to have to work through. But that looks like an interesting relationship.
Yeah, I'm really interested to kind of see what turns into. I'm really intrigued to see Caleb McLaughlin. He plays the lead Cole. He is in Stranger Things. That's where you've previously seen him. I'm excited to see him kind of branch out. Yeah, from kind of the cast there, because I haven't seen him in a whole lot of independent projects. I've seen like Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown. They've gotten around to do other things. So he's good stuff. I think he's understated in that show, and I'm excited to see him kind of get some independent work. And it seems like Idris Elba's really into the project.
I mean, yeah, he always brings his game.
So I don't know, Concrete Cowboy. It will be coming out. Oh gosh, I don't actually have a release date. What have I done? I'll look for that real quick. Andy's got a trailer you can talk about.
Right. So we're also going to be looking at a trailer for a film called Voyagers, which is a sci-fi space drama thriller starring Colin Farrell and also Ty Sheridan and Fionn Whitehead, who has kind of got his start in Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan's film. So the plot looks like there's some sort of kind of exploratory colonization mission in space, and there's a generation of of children, or that has to essentially be born, raised in space, to kind of fill in that gap before they get to the planet. They're on this 86-year journey, and Colin Farrell is like the one adult who has to sit there and make sure all these kids are like raised, and they eat certain diets and are schooled. And it looks like apparently they discover that they're they take some sort of medicine to kind of suppress all their like emotions and urges,
passion, that kind of thing. Yeah.
It kind of just makes them like robots. And they eventually stop taking this medicine. They realize it's doing this, and so then like you got a bunch of teenagers giving into urges and just passion, anger, rage, all these things. And so it looks like eventually it's all gonna like lose control while they're supposed to be on this space mission to colonize the planet or whatever. I really like the look of this. I love sci-fi. Colin Farrell's good. Ty Sheridan and Fionn Whitehead are good. So it looks really interesting. Looks like a thriller, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this one. It checks a lot of boxes for films we've already seen. It looks a lot like Lord of the Flies, right? Bunch of kids that have to deal with each other, like go nuts and decide that there's going to be some new hierarchy of how power is distributed amongst the group of children they're dealing with. But it's got a pretty good cast. Fionn Whitehead from Dunkirk, who I don't think I've seen since, who was great in Dunkirk and looks great in this. Ty Sheridan's obviously solid. Also, Lily Rose Depp, Johnny Depp's daughter, is
that's who that is.
One of the primary women featured, and Colin Farrell is probably good grumpy dad Colin Farrell. It also looks real claustrophobic, which I like. It looks real tight because they're on this spaceship, and like that's kind of where everything seems to be going on. So it's a lot of white walls, white clothes, white floors. Everything's very like sanitized and sterilized, but very, very small quarters. And so when these kids start to figure out, hey, we don't have to take our meds and nobody will know any better, and then they start getting in fights and making out with each other, it's like, okay, this is a bit of in-space chaos I can get behind. So we'll see. I did look it up. Concrete Cowboy is coming to Netflix on April 2nd. Voyagers will be in theaters on April 9th. So some things to look forward to, whether you're at home or going to the movies. And with that, we should probably get to the goods, the point of this whole episode. I'm excited to talk about it. Andy, I hope you're jazzed too, because you're taking the summary. Best of luck, sir. Please take it away.
Zack Snyder's Justice League. So the long awaited Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. For those who don't remember, he was the original director of the film, supposed to come out in 2017. He had a tragedy in the family, death in the family, and had to back away from that project after it was already mostly done. It had been shot, and they brought in Joss Whedon of Avengers fame to finish out the movie. To very mediocre reception. It was kind of all over the place, tonally, a little bit Avengers, a little bit Zack Snyder. Didn't make a lot of money, underperformed, and it essentially crashed the DCEU up to that point. All these things it was supposed to set up didn't really happen after that. So then Zack Snyder, there was a big fan poll or fan push for him to get his cut released, and HBO eventually, or Warner Bros. Eventually, gave him the $70 million to finish his cut of the film and redo a lot of things. And that's what we get. This film is 4 hours long. It's in 7 unique parts. It is quite the undertaking. Our story is at the beginning of the film. We have Batman, of course, who senses some sort of attack, kind of extraterrestrial threat coming, and so he sets out on a mission to gather other metahumans, such as Aquaman, the Flash, Cyborg, Wonder Woman, to bring the team together to fight this incoming threat. In the meantime, we meet the antagonist Steppenwolf, who's the kind of a harbinger of doom, of Darkseid, who's an even kind of bigger bad guy. He comes to Earth looking for 3 mother boxes, which are some sort of alien technology that will enable him to take over and conquer Earth. And so he lands on Earth looking for these, and the Justice League has to try and stop him, as well as overcoming their own personal differences and difficulties and kind of personal tragedies, and also bring back a certain red cape that's missing from the Justice League. Because if you don't remember, as most people don't, Superman died in Batman vs Superman from 2014 or so, and so he is not at the beginning of this film. So that's our story. We got quite a bit to talk about. This is 4 hours of film. I haven't seen anything like this. Never seen a film get this kind of recut and distribution. So, Zach, what are your initial thoughts?
So, if you've listened to Off Script for a long time, I don't think it will be any surprise to you when I say that I have talked an awful lot of smack about Zack Snyder's Justice League. This movie has everything going against it. It is a recut of a 2017 film, the original Justice League?
2017, yeah. November 2017.
I thought it came out like 3 years ago. Okay, so almost a 4-year-old film now, that has been through production hell, that has had producers and actors and cast involved on Twitter arguing at each other. We've had fingers pointed at Warner Brothers. We've had protests and signs, online petitions with hundreds of thousands of signatures. Finally, somehow, we've come full circle after $100 million in reshoots in 2017 and then another $80 million in reshoots in 2020 to produce a 4-hour epic that is Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I am so pleased to report it is not a bad movie. And I can't believe that I'm saying that. It is surprisingly good. I actually liked it a lot more than I thought it did. It has problems. It has deep problems. But like,
it definitely does.
Snyder's commitment to vision, to say, this is what I believe, this is how I believe this epic should play out, the tone, the structure, is so encouraging that he was able to come back and finish this work and really do something bold with it is really grand. And I love the scale of it and I love the feel of it. There's a lot I like about Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I love that I'm able to say that. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was the same way. I was really skeptical. I've been, a Zack Snyder hater, and I wasn't impressed with his previous work. Most of his previous work in the comic book film era, I felt like he didn't really get it. A lot of convoluted plots and just not. I always talk about, comic book movies need comic book moments, and I felt like that was lacking in a lot of his previous work. But he really turned it around. I actually sat through this twice. Because the first time I saw it, I was so skeptical and I was kind of, hating on it. And I was like, oh, this is Zack Snyder. And then, but after I ended up, I finished it the first time and I really liked most of it. So then I went back and gave it a second viewing just to kind of see it with even more clarity, when I'm not anticipating what is or isn't going to happen.
Oh my gosh. And that's coming off of you having rewatched the theatrical cut last week.
Yeah. So I've had like 10 hours of Justice League.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well then, yeah, there's no better person for me to be talking to about this. So you liked it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Never would I have thought I would have liked this movie, like ever. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but there's so much here that works, that really works. So what's the best way to jump into this? Do we talk about, I guess we should talk about this by itself and then talk about how it's different from the original, or do we just talk about the theatrical and then walk our way into what this is doing?
I think we can start with just what makes this work that didn't make the other one work.
Great idea.
So I think one of the big issues is we just have better character development. One of my big problems with the other one is like I felt like you were introduced to characters and didn't really get to know them, but this version, you get a lot of backstory of everyone, basically, but especially Cyborg's character. Very interesting. It kind of dives into his creation and his backstory and his relationship with his father, which is very, tumultuous. You get a lot more of him. You get more of the Flash as well. And the setup for what would and may or may not be future DC films is done better. Like there's more of like Aquaman and his like. The things that lead into his movie are done better, and you kind of see where that's going. Where it's really fleeting in the Joss Whedon cut. We get to know our antagonist a lot more, Steppenwolf. In the first one, he's kind of a forgettable big, but he's the bad guy. And in this one, he is a much more complex character. He has more scenes, kind of that dive into his motivation and his situation, which we find out that he's kind of a fallen angel figure who's trying to get back into the good graces of Darkseid, his, the bigger bad than him.
Yes. Yeah. The larger antagonist. No, you're right. We've got better character introductions on, or better characters all around on both the good and bad side, which is tremendous. We get a much slower pace. This movie is obviously longer. Originally, looking back at Snyder's like kind of original work before Whedon took over in 2017 or late 2016 to finish the movie for 2017. Snyder originally wanted this. He originally wanted like a 4-hour epic, and reportedly he had gotten it down to like 2 hours and 40 minutes before he left Warner Brothers. And I feel like watching this movie, somebody must have watched this and gone, some studio executive must have watched this and been like, this is great, but we can't release this. Like, we cannot put a 4-hour movie in theaters. We won't get enough screenings. We won't make enough money. People will not sit for it. They'll say it's too long. It's unwatchable, but only because of the length. That's it. That's the only reason I think it doesn't work. So they called in Joss Whedon and they were like, add jokes and make it lighter and turn up the saturation a little bit, because Zack Snyder loves his desaturated grays, right? And go reshoot some stuff where Ezra Miller's a little funnier and Batman has a couple funny lines, because the Flash can't be the only comic relief. Like, really round this thing out, make it feel like a Marvel movie. And that's like the biggest misstep, because it was never supposed to be one. Like, it is supposed to be this entirely different tonal piece that's very grand in scale. It feels like Snyder is trying to make the Lord of the Rings of comic book movies. Like, this thing really is supposed to be, yes, the grandest end all be all mashup of the world, having very little foundation, because he's only had what, 2 films? So is Man of Steel and Batman v Superman to make that happen?
Yeah, one maybe. I think maybe the Wonder Woman movie had come out.
Maybe, but I think by then it had, maybe, yeah. Like, just swinging for the fences. And Whedon came in and walked all over that and duct taped it together with what he thought was a better vision. And it was a huge mistake, because what Snyder shot, the sequences he put together, the way it's all supposed to be laid out in his vision, feels so much more powerful than what Whedon did. Even though it's longer, even though it takes longer to get there, the payoff is that much greater. And it's so much better for the DC universe than trying to just mock up Marvel. It's so much better.
Yeah, there's some really, really nice scenes that are. There's a scene with the Flash, and I think the third act, which is really amazing. And
opening of the third act. Yeah, I know exactly the scene you're talking about. Yes,
and also done very differently from like the corresponding Marvel scene, which is with Quicksilver. Completely different, but still like, a speedster. Thing.
It's arguably the best scene in the film. If you've watched it, you probably know what we're talking about.
But yeah, there's several moments like that where he brings out, like, it's very operatic, it's very epic in scale, and it's like, I talk about in comic books when you have those big page turn moments of like that make you gasp. We finally get a lot of those, and there's like none of them in the original cut. And I was like, I don't know what Joss Whedon was thinking, because he left out a lot of really, really good material.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, there's stuff in this film that, like, I do not understand what director in their right mind decided it was worth leaving on the cutting room floor. Like, even if you're trying to cut it for time, even if you're trying to put it together efficiently, it doesn't make any sense. Additionally, since this has come out, people have gone back and looked at Whedon's work, at the scenes that he's used to kind of cobble together, like, disparate scenes, instead of using these longer pieces Snyder has, right? Snyder would take 25 minutes to explain Cyborg's backstory. He does, like, in a few scenes. And Whedon looked at that and was like, how can I cut that down to 4 and make one scene that I can reshoot in between these 2-minute scenes and just make it a 4-minute thing? How can I do that? And so that was kind of his goal. And it's like, he went at it with a hatchet. Like, I don't get it. And I know it's too long. And the funny thing is about where we're at now versus 2017 is, now Snyder's 4-hour cut works because we have streaming services to carry it. It wouldn't have worked in a theater in 2017, but on HBO Max, it's great. And arguably, I mean, when they announced it, they were saying it was going to be in parts anyway. It was going to be four
1 hour.
1 hours. Yeah. And then episodes, they said, well, no, it'll be two hours. And then it ended up just being 4. HBO Max, by the way, does a great job of specifically marking in the timeline where the parts start, so you can see the chapters as you're watching the movie. That's a smart move by them. But like the ability for this movie to exist now only really works because of HBO Max, because of the platform it's on. And thank God, because it's so much better than the Whedon version. Now we need to talk about what's going on in it and why it might be a shame that they're not doing anything with it going forward.
Yes. So what I mentioned that some of what would have been or what might still be future films are set up much better. Like we said, I mean, the Aquaman film has already come out, and so this gives that a little bit better setup retroactively. The other one that may or may not come out is the Flash movie. We get a lot more scenes with Barry Allen, and we get hints of his what his movie will be about, which, as we've kind of said before, involves time travel. We get a little bit of that in this film, and that kind of excited me because I was like, oh, this is a setup for what he's going to be doing in the future, and that's really exciting, and that's really cool.
Yeah, since this film has come out, Warner Brothers has gone on record and said we are not taking any direction from this movie going forward in the series. Think of this like a fan fiction. Like, this is not, there will not be films that build off of this one. Anything coming forward still exists in like the Whedon Justice League timeline, if they're still using that, I guess. And that's such a shame. Yeah, because I so much more enjoy the characters as they're presented here. Obviously, following Justice League, like either one, the Flash movie I think will be the same, but I enjoyed the characters so much more here, and they all felt so much more powerful. And I felt like each one of them was deserving of their own property. Yeah, there needs to be a Flash movie after I've seen this movie because the Flash is awesome in this movie. Cyborg is broken strong in this movie, and it's like he could probably have his own thing. There needs to be a Batman movie.
He's a little OP in this movie.
We maybe off the show because that's a bit spoilery. We'll talk about how busted Cyborg is in this movie.
Well, I can say that there was, I think it was you or Matt shared an article that said, Cyborg is as powerful as Dr. Manhattan. And we had mentioned that was ludicrous and absurd. But then after you watch this movie, you're like, well, I kind of see where they got that from.
Yeah, right. The actor who plays Cyborg, who's been very, very publicly disparaged by Warner Brothers because of the Whedon cut. Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg, was so mad at Warner Brothers for the past like 4 years. He's been just furious. And look, watching the Snyder cut now, I get it. They destroyed his character in the Whedon cut. Like, he is barely in that movie. In the Snyder cut, he's like he's like a freaking god. And that's what all of these characters are supposed to be. They're supposed to be basically gods. Like, that's what we're watching. And it shows, and that's what it feels like. And it feels very grand and strong. So without further ado, let's just jump into the meat and potatoes, man. Let's start talking about the movie. Like, we gotta get into this. So what's the best place to break this down? I guess part one, right, where it all starts.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, we've talked about characters, performances, action.
Real quick before we jump into it, I do want to talk about how the structure is formally different from the Whedon cut. Right, most of the footage in the Whedon cut was shot by Snyder. There's not that much that was shot by Joss Whedon, believe it or not. And what's surprising is all of the good scenes in the Whedon cut are from Snyder. He shot everything good. Like, everything lame in the Whedon cut seems to have come from Joss Whedon.
Yeah,
everything
totally
awesome seems to have come from Zack Snyder. Like, everything cool. And that's not necessarily surprising, but this movie is structured differently in that these scenes are placed differently. And there's longer scenes in between them and stuff we didn't see. There's a large sequence that takes place on Themyscira, right? Is that the name of it? Wonder Woman's homeworld? Yeah, there's a whole bit there we don't see. There is a ton of backstory for Cyborg and Flash we don't get to see. There's the way these characters meet and interact with each other is different. You might remember famously in the Whedon cut how it opens with Batman finding evidence of the mother boxes because he just happens to ice a parademon, like when he's looking for a robber, for a guy who's robbing an apartment. This
that intro is super weak.
Right. Yeah, it's super weak. Yeah, this starts off completely different, with completely different motivation and a totally different way for our heroes to discover the presence of these mother boxes and the threat of Steppenwolf. So obviously there's a lot of the same scenes in here, but there's a lot more added, and it's placed differently. You'll see a shot from a scene from the Whedon version that's 30 minutes in the movie might be 10 minutes in here, or something that was an hour in the Whedon version might be 2.5 hours here. It's all there. Everything's there. but it's just structured differently and in such a smarter way. And it's really stunning work. I mean, it's really outstanding.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier to follow. I mean, that was one of my complaints of the Whedon cut is it's the plot's a little convoluted. It still is in here, but it's a little bit easier to follow just because it takes its time more. A lot of the scenes, like the big fight on Wonder Woman's island, is extended. It's a lot cooler. It also makes more and more sense. There's this whole part where they're like trying to seal the tomb or whatever, and it makes way more sense in this than it did in the Whedon cut. And then there's also, I'm trying to there's the backstory called the Age of Heroes that kind of goes back 5,000 years or whatever. That's much more extended as well. It really takes its time. It's a little indulgent, but for what it is, it makes everything make a little bit more sense.
True. I do think this movie is very indulgent, actually. But I love it. Like I mean, in the way a Tarantino film is indulgent. Like Snyder has like really grabbed the freaking director's chair and like, I don't know, hung on to that thing. Like he owns every bit of the creative vision in this film. And it's bold and it's striking. And I like it because it's so much more different than a Marvel film that we've come to expect with like, somebody said it great. I was watching an early review of this and somebody said it so perfect. They said, a Marvel movie, it never really takes itself seriously, right? Like Marvel movies are always poking fun at themselves. Iron Man's making fun of Thor's hair. Captain America says something stupid about I don't know, Captain America's a goody two shoes, but you get the point, right? Like they're always making fun of each other. Yeah, right. They're all trying to pick up Thor's hammer and Ultron and can't do it. Like there's lots of goofy kind of things. And it never really expects you to take the comic book movie world seriously until the stakes are high, until Rhodey gets thrown out of the sky and is paralyzed from the legs down, or Winter Soldier loses his arm or something. Like that's when it matters. That's when you're supposed to care. When Robert Downey Jr., when Iron Man's about to snap for the Infinity Gauntlet, like that's when it really counts. But otherwise, you're kind of just supposed to sit back and eat your popcorn and go for the ride, right? Zack Snyder has leaned so far in the opposite way. Everything is epic. Everything is bold. Everything is dramatic lighting and washed out grays and really unique tonal soundtrack choice. And it makes everything feel so much more grand. And that's something they couldn't quite hit in Man of Steel. I think because the writing, they couldn't quite get it in Batman v Superman. I'm not sure why. But here, with 4 hours to play with, it finally happens.
We finally get it.
Yes. And it's like, this is what he was trying to do with those films. This is what he was trying to do in Watchmen. He was trying to hit this level of like grand expanse. And we're finally here. Like, and everything feels so bold. Scenes are 20 minutes long if they have to be. Like the lighting is dramatic. Everything's so it's just huge. And I love it because that feels so much more different than a Marvel film. It feels so much more unique for a comic book property. And that's exactly what DC needs to be doing, going the opposite way. And they're doing great at it in this movie.
Yeah, the overall tone is just so much different than the other cut. And also, like you said, all the Marvel films, it's much more serious. It's much more grand, epic in scale. And part of that has to do with the score, which is completely different. So they had, in the original cut, they brought in Danny Elfman, who would course had done like the original Batman, the 1989 Batman score, and he kind of brought back a lot of that kind of sounding music, and it was fine but not real memorable. But in this, and I forget the composer's name, it's Tom something, he mixes in a lot of the music that we got from Hans Zimmer and kind of that we got in Man of Steel specifically, and it's just a different beast. It's much more grand. It's much more, like I said, like opera, and it's a great score in that, and that lends to these great scenes behind it.
Yeah, so I've actually got a funny answer for this. They rescored the film for Whedon. This is I don't know if it's quite the original score, but it's much closer to what they wanted. I don't remember the name of the composer either, but I know his stage name's Junkie XL. It's a guy who did the music for Mad Max, Fury Road, and a handful of other recent projects. He did all of the music for Zack Snyder's Justice League. When Whedon came in, he thought it was too dark and recut it with Danny Elfman, who had done some looser stuff, much more kind of crowd pleasing, not quite as experimental. And he also filled out the soundtrack with much more like pop culture appropriate songs. I'm honestly a little surprised Whedon's cut still opens with a Leonard Cohen track. It's a woman singing it, but they've got that opening montage played set to Everybody Knows, which
Right.
is actually a really good montage for what it's worth, but that's not present here. This is new music. This is different. And also this has a lot of opera and like choirs and
Yeah,
like
the
ancient
choice.
lamentations when Wonder
Yeah,
Woman is on screen.
that's a really funny bit.
It's a funny bit for sure. It's a little much, but
So the other thing that you were mentioning, song choice, a lot of the songs that are chosen, like not that are non-score, that are pre-existing songs, are so much better, and they fit better. There's a long scene with Lois Lane where she's like lamenting the loss of Superman that has a really good song choice mixed in, and those songs are much more unique and they fit better, and it's not just the generic. Because I remember the big push in the original cut was the "Come Together" song,
yeah.
which was like really kind of cheesy.
Right. Whereas like this movie, like when characters are doing, I mean, even when they're introduced, Wonder Woman is introduced on screen to a Nick Cave song. Aquaman is introduced to a Nick Cave song. Tim Buckley is present on this soundtrack. I think it's a cover of the track that plays when Flash is on screen. It's very like thoughtful music, and it's very strange. If you watch the trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League, one of the more recent ones, that's set to Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, that music is basically the whole movie. It's 110% commitment to it. But I kind of super liked it. Like I wanted to hate it. I wanted to be like, this is cheesy and over the top, but like it's actually kind of not bad. Like somehow it works because his commitment to shooting stuff in slow-mo and making it all feel bold is like so wonderful. And it matches perfectly with like the striking color palette and lighting. Snyder is very committed to like the desaturated colors. Nothing is overly bright. Nothing is overly toned. There's a reason the poster's in freaking black and white. And supposedly, up to this point, there's a black and white version coming out with this that he claims is the definitive Snyder cut.
It's the real cut. I will definitely.
I will probably end up watching it. Yeah,
I will watch the black and white version of this.
I liked this cut so much, I'll probably watch the black and white cut, which is nuts to me. It's
so
like go ahead.
I was going to say that brings me to another thing that I really like, and I think that is a lot different, is kind of our final epic showdown climax of the film. Much different from what we get in the Whedon cut. Much more exciting and also better. You know what? One of the things that I kind of complained about the other cut was, it seems like at the end they're just stalling until Superman shows up, and they're not really working together like they do in the Avengers. Like they got all your separate powers together, work together to defeat the big bad guy. That happens a lot more in this, where they're working together to like overcome to try and beat Steppenwolf.
Yeah, that's something I've complained about with DC movies in the past. They don't ever have heroes like actively coordinate their powers or anything, or their abilities to work together, right? Marvel does this great. You think of Avengers Infinity War, Endgame, or even the opening Avengers. Iron Man shoots a big laser out of his chest, and Captain America uses a shield to block it because vibranium will block it, and it'll push off towards somebody else and can deflect it. Thor can throw his hammer and it'll hit Captain America's shield and make a big shockwave. Like they can combine powers to do things. That actually happens in this movie multiple times. It's awesome. And additionally, Steppenwolf, our hero, in the Whedon cut, he feels like a side character. Like he's a half hero. He doesn't get nearly the glory of any kind of Marvel super villains. Like he's some total nobody. And it's like, this guy just feels like a wash up. Like he's strong, sure, but like he doesn't really have any backstory. He's kind of just this goofy looking alien with horns from Mars or wherever. And Superman goes down, like destroys him at the end of the film. In this movie, he still feels that way, but he's supposed to, because he's not the big bad. There's like 3 big bads and like an army of big bads on some other planet in some other world that he's just answering to. He's a crony, and he always was a crony. But the difference is, in the Whedon version, you don't know that. And in this movie, he is. He's a goon. Like he's one step of a series of larger antagonists that make this feel like a really large, grand thing. And additionally, it's worth mentioning, there's no the internet has figured this out very quickly. There's no Russian family in this movie. Joss Whedon, Joss Whedon added in his cut at the climax. There's Superman shows up to beat down on Steppenwolf, because in Whedon's cut, The Justice League has pretty much decided, hey, without Superman, we can't do anything. He's really it. We have to have Superman beat Steppenwolf. And Superman shows up to beat down on him. And then he randomly decides, wait, there's this family up top above this complex we're in that's going to get hurt if I don't go save them. And he flies out of there with the Flash, and the two of them basically aren't around for the final fight. That's their excuse to have the other like heroes kind of get in on the fight and work with them. In this movie, no, that was all added by Whedon. There is no Russian family. Superman shows up, it's time. Like it is going down and it's awesome, and the other heroes help. It's not just the Superman show. Like Flash gets this awesome bit in there, and Cyborg is doing this huge thing. Really, the only character that gets sidelined at the end is Batman, and maybe Wonder Woman a little. But Batman's human. He should get sidelined. Like he's not some crazy, superhero god. He's a guy in a suit. I get it. That makes sense to me. Like it seems like all these things that were missteps in the Whedon version are advantages in this version. Everything that felt bad there feels good here. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I was going to mention about Steppenwolf and kind of his cronies. In the Whedon cut, there is no Darkseid. There is no any of those characters. And Darkseid is supposed to be like kind of like Thanos is in for Marvel. It's supposed to be an even bigger threat, more powerful than everyone that's fought. And we get to see him and his cronies interact, and we get to, we hint towards future movies, and who knows whether they will or won't happen, but we're introduced to someone bigger than our current antagonist, a future threat, a bigger threat, and we get some background scenes. We get some kind of like imagined, if he does come here and take over, what will it happen? What will it look like? Kind of thing. And that's a big part. And I remember we had that stupid, like, Batman in a trench coat vision, something in the Whedon cut. That's not here. I think I know which scene he was kind of trying to like mock or take that off of, but that part's not there. And the Darkseid stuff is, I think, really cool. Because at first, like I said, I was real skeptical when I started this, and when we first start meeting these other characters, other big bad guys, I was just like, well, this doesn't really go anywhere. Like, but they use it really well. They use it to create a menacing threat of things to come, past this film. And like the thing with the Whedon cut is, they didn't go anywhere from it. They didn't take any cues outside of Aquaman, which was already planned. They hadn't moved forward with any properties after. I mean, I don't think they really had a plan. I think they were set to maybe reset. So really things are still open.
Yeah. And I hope that means something, because like Zach's that I don't see a better way forward for DC than this film. Like the Flashpoint movie sounds awesome, but part of the whole reason I was interested in the Flash movie is because the Flash in the DC universe can move through time, and there's potential for the Flash to basically rewrite parts of the DC cinematic universe here that aren't working. Had this been the movie, there's nothing to rewrite. Like this is the way you should go. Keep going this direction. At least that's what I think they should do. But like, they're not gonna, I don't think. And I hope they do, like, because I think there's a lot here. I hope they reconsider. I don't know how much.
I mean, it's all up in the air. I think. I don't think it's been really decided on. They've been kind of focusing on the individual properties and doing, multiverse things so they can bring in different versions of the characters.
Yeah, and I hope they keep an open mind about this stuff. I don't know if Snyder is over it. He may just be like, no, man, I don't want to make anything more like this. But I don't think you spend $80 million recutting an already recut movie that cost $100 million after the first set of recuts for nothing. Like I think there's a reason they did this. I hope strategically they look at like the numbers and it comes out to work for them, because believe it or not, like this movie's got a 73% on Rotten Tomatoes, which may not seem like much, but that's a Snyder film, and Snyder movies do not get that like normally. Like this is a 96% audience approval rating. People like this movie, and it's hard not to talk about why they did this without talking about the release the Snyder Cut movement.
Right. There was a big push to redo the film, to get get the Snyder, and we laughed at it. If you go back and listen to our
Oh my
first
God,
episode,
we laughed at it.
we were like, no, this is ridiculous. This is never going to happen. They're never going
Of
to give them
course.
money. This is a terrible movie. Redoing it's
Yeah.
not going to make it better.
This is a
Well,
waste of time. Yeah.
Turns out we were wrong.
Yeah, whatever. This is all that all happens in front of a green screen. Whatever Snyder shot will never be finished. Give it up. We're here for the memes, right? No, these people fought Warner Brothers. They fought Joss Whedon. They fought the internet patronizing them because they wanted this thing. They raised $250,000 for the Americans for Suicide Prevention in a big charity thing to try to push this movie. $250,000 they raised just to try to get the Snyder Cut moving, to get on Warner Brothers' radar. And what's horrifying is it totally worked. And it was worth it. It was worth it. It was all worth it. And it's good. And like, I don't know how to handle that in my brain.
I mean, sometimes you never know, because a lot of times when you give into audience what the fanboys want, a lot of times it's bad. That's how we get, Star Wars Episode 9, which is complete fan service and really forgettable and really bad. In this case, it turned out. But I think the difference is here, this wasn't about giving into fan service. It was about giving into the director's original vision.
Yeah. Regarding Snyder's original vision, I do have thoughts about that. Originally, Snyder had wanted to make 2 more films in the Justice League after this. And he definitely makes it clear at the end of the film what direction he wanted to go in. And I think that's part of the reason Warner Brothers is kind of scared to run with that. Without getting into spoilers, any takes on the bold ending of this film?
Yeah, I'll try to be a spoiler free. I think that hints to, if you're familiar with some of the DC video games that have come out recently, I think it hints at storylines there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are future films that were teased, and the fact that they're doing multiverse stuff now means they might still be able to do it. Before we finish up, though, we need to talk about the things that don't work, the issues, as much as we've been praising it.
Yeah, I know we do. This can't all be good. So, Andy, what is your biggest critique of this film? Because I know what mine is. I'm sure it's the same as yours.
So it's similar to the original cut, which is the plot is still a little bit overly convoluted. There's so much going on, because we get elaborate backstories for Cyborg and Wonder Woman. There's a big thing that happens on her island, and the Flash, as well as the whole mother box thing gets really, really complicated. It's like, okay, there's these boxes, they do this, they're here, we got to find them and keep them. Like it gets really like lored out. It gets really in the weeds with it. It becomes a little overly complicated, which also leads to another point. Like, if you haven't seen any of the other stuff and you're not real familiar with a lot of comic book lore, you might be completely lost.
Yeah, they definitely do not shy away from that. There's a few instances in this film where like I had no idea what was going on screen, and then I looked it up and it was like, oh well, if you're a DC fan, you get it. There's a real commitment to leaning into that. Snyder's vision here is unabashed, and there's points where he wanted to introduce characters from the larger DC universe, and he just did it. He was like, I don't care that they haven't been featured or mentioned anywhere previous. Like, this is it. This is where they're coming in. I mean, this is the first time we see the Flash and Cyborg, right? And they're in the Justice League. Why the hell can't I talk about this character or reference this character from this thing that I haven't touched? Like, why can't I do that? And he did. The thing I would discount this the most for is just the runtime. It's just too long. And I know it's a bold vision, but I think this would have worked great as either 4 like 1 hour chunks that maybe were tightened a little better on the ends to kind of bumper them up next to each other. So you want to finish episode 1 and jump right into episode 2, or 2 half parts. Like I said, it is very fortunate that HBO has specifically timestamped in the timeline, like white highlights. Hey, here's where part 1 starts. Here where part 2 starts, because I did not watch this in one sitting. I watched this over the course of 3 days, almost 4. And it was a little hard to keep up with everything. It's hard to stay tonally in the seat with Zack Snyder along for the ride when you have like a day of life in between segments of the film.
Yeah.
So
we've talked about this before with this is more of a TV thing, but something like Netflix invented binging, but we realized that you can also kind of blow all your kind of social capital on one weekend. Like, when Stranger Things comes out, everyone rushes to watch it in a weekend, whereas Disney Plus with their longer shows, they go on for 8 weeks. So, if you would have done, let's say, 1 hour release every week. With this, then you would have had like a month of like no one talking about anything but Justice League.
Right. Like WandaVision is only 4 hours of content. It's a little more, but like it's eight parts of
9.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a little longer than 4 hours. It's like 5
It's about
hours of
6.
content.
Yeah, 5 or 6.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a little off, but like the point is, like, that was like an event that took the course of 2 months, like, to get through, that people were making memes and talking about. And like, it's almost a shame that doesn't happen here, because it's really something else. And I get the commitment to the films, right? Like, Snyder's always said that. He's like, I don't want to make miniseries. I want to make movies. Like, this is my thing. But like, at this point, I'd say Snyder needs to really consider making a miniseries. Give him the time. Obviously, he can use it. Like, give him the time and give him the budget to make something really grand and split it up over like 8 weeks. And like,
Well,
I
and
think
then
we'd
he
have
could-
something really to talk about.
Yeah, he could really have indulged even more if he would have been given 5-6 hours.
Right. Like, that would have been even more so. And by the end of that run, I mean, I think a lot of us would have been, he would have been a real name in TV series, but instead he committed to the movie, and I respect that. But man, I would want to see more. Either spread it up better and make it longer, or just tighten it up. There's stuff you could cut here for sure. There's stuff you could lose.
There is.
Yeah. So there's definitely fluff. I think the fluff is effective because tonally it drives the point home that this is supposed to be very large and grand in scale, similar to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films being near 4 hours in their extended cuts. But for what it's worth, man, I cannot believe how much I enjoyed this movie. I'm probably not going to watch it again anytime soon. Maybe the black and white cut, because it is a beating to watch. It is long, but
Yeah.
if you can stomach it, man, you're in for probably the best ride the DC cinematic universe has turned out so far, in my opinion. And that's beating out Wonder Woman, I think.
Mhm.
It's really good. So, any other thoughts for recommendations?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Zack Snyder's Justice League?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big surprise that this really got turned around much better than the original. I will say a couple of caveats. It really helps if you're invested in these characters or in comic book movies in general. If you're not, if you're new to it, it might be a little confusing. And again, that's my only thing, is that the plot's a little, convoluted. And if you're not familiar with a lot of things, you might be a little lost. Other than that, it's a huge improvement over the original cut. Much better performances, better storyline, better in tone, scale, score. Really enjoyed it. I've seen it twice, which is full 8 hours. So highly recommended from me.
Yeah, I would recommend it as well. I would recommend you definitely do not try to tackle this in one sitting, for sure. I think it's probably overload. Take a break. If you're going to try to do it in one day, like sit down and really give it 2 hours and then take a break and then do the next 2. I watched it over the course of 3 days, and that was too much. That was too split up. So, I mean, maybe if you tried to go by hour and do it over the course of like a week, maybe, but I think you should try to watch this as much in one piece as possible, or at least like 2 chunks. Yeah, 2 separate.
By the way, I would definitely there's a lot of this I saw and I was like, I wish I were in a theater right now, because this would be so epic on the big screen and the big speakers and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. We didn't talk about the format, 4x3. Does that bother you at all? I mean, where were you?
No. I was fine with it.
I kind of liked it in a weird way, for a couple of things. One, because supposedly it would have looked awesome blown up on like an IMAX, and maybe one day we'll get something like that. Which, by the way, open invitation, Andy. If they ever bring Zack Snyder's Justice League to an IMAX theater,
We're doing
Dude,
it.
I don't know how I'm going to marathon 4 hours, but it would be so grand on a screen. And 2, in a way, it felt a little bit more like a comic book panel. For some reason, the square format like really kind of worked. I didn't really mind it at all. So I don't think that'll bother you if you're watching it. Would recommend. Good stuff. I don't believe it. Their dreams can come true. Zack Snyder's Justice League can be good. Let the world know. It's not a bad movie. And with that, we need to wrap our show. Before we get there, I've got a little bit of listener correspondence I want to mention. Last week, LA Confidential, we covered at the request of Jamal Park on Twitter at Mapstone Park. He thanked us for doing that. So thanks, Jamal. It was our pleasure. Loved it. And let us know if there's anything else you want us to watch. Also, we got a comment on YouTube that I wanted to mention from a wonderful man named Todd Stone regarding our Earwig and the Witch review we did a few weeks ago, the animated Studio Ghibli films. There's a couple issues here with the language. It's YouTube, so it happens, but I'm going to try to get this best I can. Todd said, I've watched Earwig and the Witch 2 times, fan sub first and English dub is the second. He thinks it's the most underrated 3D animation in anime. movie. Frankly, he said it's humble, but it's far beyond precious. The meaning, while cherished, is still, I don't know what that means. But he enjoyed it. He said it reminds him of movies like Pop from Up on Poppy Hill and Ronya, the Studio Ghibli series on Amazon Prime. Not like their best, but certainly not one of their worst and worth revisiting. So thanks, Todd. Thanks for writing in, man. I appreciate it. I kind of agree. It's definitely of that scale. I don't know if I'd rewatch it, but not a bad movie for sure. Andy, what are we watching next week?
So next week we have a couple of new things coming up. First is the theatrical release of Bob Odenkirk's action kind of John Wick take comedy action thing called Nobody, which is in theaters starting this Friday. And then we're also going to talk about Another Round, which is the Mads Mikkelsen. It's actually a foreign film comedy, highly praised. Haven't seen it. The director is nominated for Best Director at the Oscars, and that's available to rent on video on demand.
Yes, I'm excited to see both of those, especially Another Round. I've wanted to see that ever since I saw a trailer like a year ago, because it's came out in Denmark originally and took a while to get over here, but it's on VOD. We're going to watch it. Nobody will be in theaters. Go ahead and watch it with us if you have the means. Otherwise, movies are expensive. Podcasts are cheap. Listen to Off Script and we'll tell you all about it. Except for spoilers, of course. Yes. If you enjoyed the show today, if you liked our review of Zack Snyder's Justice League, the news, the trailers, what we're doing next week, if you just want to get more involved with what we're doing, subscribe to the show. Subscribe so you can get new episodes of Off Script every single week straight to your phone. You can also rate and review us. That would help us a ton. You don't even know. You can follow us on Facebook, where we live stream the show every single Tuesday evening. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram, I think. We're all over the place. And you can comment on any of those services to probably get a hold of us. But the best way to correspond with the show and tell us what you think of the show, or recommendations like Jamal, or feedback like Todd, is to email us at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com. Check out our website, offscriptfilmreview.com, where we're posting episodes and interviews and content all the time. Most of the time, I'll be honest, not all the time, but a lot of the time. And yeah, I think that wraps our show. My God, Justice League. What an undertaking, huh, Andy?
Yeah.
Man. All right.
It's a first.
Well,
it's a first.
Let me tell you, it really is. I can't believe it. It was actually good. Who thought? Anyway, from all of us at Off Script, the home of Bold Cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for listening.